Hello, I'm James Fitzsimons and welcome to The Career Scoop, a podcast all about career progression, advice and experiences aimed at assisting those who are in career transition. Today my guest is John Hewitson. John grew up as a farmer's son in Northern England, then went to serve in the Royal Airforce in World War II as a radio engineer and ended up working his way into the high ranks of Albright and Wilson. I'm delighted to welcome you to the show, John. Just a quick one, John. Can you give us a quick overview of your career to date? Talk about the highs and lows. What are you most proud of?
Well, I'll take you up to my 18th birthday very quickly. I went to Whitehaven Grammar School and shortly before my 18th birthday, I went to work for the United Steel Companies, then working in an iron and steel company in the mines and quarries area. On my 18th birthday, I was called up into the RAF. I had previously been in the ATC. I was in the RAF for just over 4 years, 4.25 years, and 1 year, first year in the UK, next 3 years in the Far East in a variety of places, including India, Sri Lanka, but then Ceylon, then Singapore, Shanghai back to Singapore, then up to Thailand for 6 months, and then back to Singapore, and came back to the UK in 1947, in August 1947, and I had my six weeks, 2 weeks for each year of disembarkation leave, and then I did the last couple of months until I was demobilized in November 1947. I went back to the United Steel Companies and I worked with them at the mines and quarries area until the end of 1954, when I took up employment with Albright and Wilson through what was then Marchon Products in Whitehaven, and I stayed with Marchon Products, who then became the Marchon division of Albright and Wilson, until the mid-1960, when I was literally sent to Italy to be admin and finance director of a new manufacturing company which was being set up in a place called Castiglione della Stiviera, very close to Lake Garda, and I served there for 6.5 years as the admin finance director before returning to the UK at the beginning of 1967. My wife, Mary, was with me at that time, and she had been the the technical director or technical laboratory manageress for the period until our first child was born in 1943, when she left to take up her child minding responsibilities. I then went with back to Whitehaven, and for the first year or so I spent most of the time setting up manufacturing operations in France, Département de la Meuse, in eastern France near Metz, in Alcover, in northeast Spain, just very close to Tarragona, south of Barcelona, and also in southern Italy, halfway between Rome and Naples. Then I took over as admin director of Albright and Wilson Marchon division, but very quickly realized that it was not my cup of tea, and I decided that it was so difficult to settle down in Whitehaven, I would move elsewhere. So I eventually was asked, would I take over a company in Ireland, both north and south, called Albright and Wilson Ireland Limited, which I did, and I continued my work there until I retired at the age of 65 in 1990.
And your highs and lows for you?
The highs and lows. The high, first high was leaving the United Steel Companies, the mines and quarries area, and moving to Marchand Products, and now the Marchand division of Albright and Wilson. Then continuing high until we moved to Italy in 1960, and early 1960, and it was a very, very difficult 6 months because we had a language problem, and we were moving around all over the place. Now virtually moved into different accommodation about half a dozen times in the 6 months period between early August 1960 and February 1961. That was a low. After that, it was a high, and it was a high until I got back to Albright and Wilson in Whitehaven, Marchand Division, and the first year back was a high because I was setting up manufacturing facilities elsewhere, and became a low after that until I came to Albright and Wilson here in Ireland.
Okay, and what mistakes have you made, if any? Impact and learning, and any funny ones?
Mistakes. To say I haven't made any mistakes would be a it would be a lie, because I think nobody goes through life without making mistakes. One mistake we made, which doesn't nothing at all to do with work at all, and that was moving to Desenzano from Castiglione shortly after Carol was born, and this was 1963, beginning of 64. And we quickly found out that it was a big mistake to have done so, and we moved back to Castiglione, and the mistake was then completely corrected. What are the mistakes? Mistake was, I don't know. In 1969, I was awarded the MBE, and in some respects, it led to a period of in the Marchand division where I was then working. It led to a division of antipathy towards me. Whether one could say that's a mistake, certainly it was a very disappointing period because people I thought were friends suddenly became my enemies.
Okay. If you were your 24-year-old self again, what career advice would you give yourself, if any?
If any. Give myself or give others?
No, give yourself.
Give myself. Face up to reality. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of hard work. don't be over concerned if you find disappointments in life, because you will find disappointments in life from time to time. Those are the times when you are put to test, and if you can overcome them, then it is good for you. It is good for you to overcome them. But the most important thing is be as truthful as you can to everyone.
That seems like sound advice. And here's a kind of tricky question. If you didn't become a businessman, what might you have been? And could you be a photographer, a professional golfer, a barman? I think you were kind of a part-time farmer when you were much younger anyway.
I would have been a market gardener.
A market gardener. So tell me why.
Because I've always, since I was about 7, I was always very keenly interested in doing the gardening. My first interest in doing the gardening was probably driven by the fact that if I didn't do the gardening, I would be doing something else on the farm which I didn't like to the same extent. So I did the gardening and I enjoyed it. I was my own boss. Nobody could tell me what to do. So I liked being my own boss. I didn't like to be bossed around.
Okay. And just going back and repeating kind of a question, are there any funny stories maybe from your time in Italy or coming to Ireland, the kind of cultural gaffes that one makes that one doesn't know one's making, particularly from English to Italian, or even being an Englishman coming to work in Ireland?
Oh, God. There are lots of funny stories.
Say around a language situation in Italy, maybe ordering stuff or dealing with tax inspectors or all that kind of formal stuff where you're...
Yeah, there was one funny story. I was taken, when I came to Ireland, I eventually sold the house in England. And in those days, for tax purposes, if you sold your own house and you were moving elsewhere to another house, you didn't have to pay tax on that if you sold it in order to do the move. But if you did the move and then a little bit later sold the house, you would have to pay tax on the calculated growth in value of that house had made during that period when you had moved from that house to the point of when you sold it. And I did exactly that when we were came to Ireland. And we sold our house in Italy, in England. I think it was 2 or 3 years after we moved to Ireland, because we'd been in a rented accommodation in Ireland for 12 months, and the rent was only £100 a month for a furnished property, which was for nothing, but it was a good house. And we saved a bit of money at that time, and when we bought our house in Castle Park, I got a loan from the bank at a special rate, so I didn't have to sell the house in the UK, but I sold the house in the UK 2 or 3 years later. And in fact, we had let the house and we didn't want to turf the people out of it. And they were paying a rent, which was a fairly nominal rent. We weren't making a fortune on it. But they were supposed to be looking after the house. The tax inspector wanted me to pay tax on the 3 years, or the 4 years since we had moved. And before I left Ireland to see the tax inspector at a meeting in Liverpool, I had a word with PricewaterhouseCoopers, or Pricewaterhouse, yeah. Why did I say PricewaterhouseCoopers? It is PricewaterhouseCoopers, isn't it?
Yes, it is now.
Yeah, their tax man, and he said to me, there was a recommendation or a decision by the Central Revenue in the UK that anyone who had moved abroad because of his work, because his company had sent him there, and then he sold his house later on, although he was absent from the house, and somebody else might have been living in it, it would not be considered that he had been absent, and therefore he wouldn't be liable for tax on it. And I was talking then to the tax inspector and so I went over to see him, and he treated me to lunch. I got the lunch, and then he said, "Now then, we'll talk about this." So we talked and talked. And I said, "But you can't do that." He said, "Of course I can." Well, I said, "I don't think you can." I said, and I had the piece of paper which I got from PricewaterhouseCoopers, because your senior tax inspector in the UK sent that circular around to every tax inspector. And if you read that circular, you'll find out you can't. And he looked at the circular and he blew his top. He was wrong. I was right.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
And how much did that save you?
That saved me, probably saved me, it would probably be about 25 pence in the pound. So it probably saved me, I don't know, a couple of thousand, something like that, 3,000.
In today's money, what would that be?
30,000, maybe.
Multiplier of 10?
Yeah, 50, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, 5 words to describe your career today.
5 words to describe my career. Interesting, hardworking, enjoyable, wouldn't change.
Great. What qualities in people do you look for when you recruit them?
Honesty, ability, hardworking, no secrecy.
Okay. What advice?
Openness.
Say it again?
Openness.
Openness. What advice would you give a 22-year-old graduate now, post-COVID, as they commence their career?
You're going to have disappointments, but be yourself. Don't try and be someone other than yourself. Be straight, be honest above all. Be prepared to work hard. Don't be a clock watcher. You're taken on to do a job, make absolutely certain the job is done.
That's sound advice. Okay, question number 8. Workplace stress, which has now been talked about, like
what?
Workplace stress. So wellness, mindfulness,
yeah,
people moving jobs. Can you comment, because your generation, you fought in a war, you came out into, which was a recession, I presume. You've been through how many recessions? So does that make sense, or is that an individual, or people react differently?
It's very difficult. It's a very hard question to answer. I would say ask a question again.
So yeah, it is. I suppose now people talk about wellness, work-life balance.
Yeah.
Okay, because I suppose people are, because of technology, they're on. There's quicker response times required. Whereas maybe in your day and earlier in my working life, you could put something in the post. It could take 3 days to get there, then 3 days to get back. So it gave you time to digest and maybe solve a problem or take the sting out of a problem. But when it comes back instantly the whole time, puts a lot of pressure on people. So I don't know if that's true compared to maybe your time maybe after the war.
I don't know. I would say if you're being pressurized to give an answer, don't be afraid to say that you can't give an answer. Don't give an answer unless you are sure that answer is the correct one. And if you're unsure, don't be afraid to say it.
And from your experience of maybe that the lesson learned of giving the wrong answer when you didn't have all the facts, can you remember any event? Did it cause something, a wrong decision being made?
Yeah, I can remember it would be the first year, and we had to make a profit. We worked night and day for 48 hours.
Oh, where was this, in Italy?
In Italy. To get them. And the others came in to help. Because I had the stock taking to do, I had all sorts of things to do. And I was under the pressure then. And if we didn't make a profit that year, it was my job that was on the line. So I had to make certain that the figures I was going to take just before about mid-December indicated that we would make a profit at the end of the year, provided we had another 2 export orders or something like that. And just make absolutely certain. I said 3 export orders and I got them.
Brilliant. And last question, and it's building on the previous question. So the workplace. So we're in funny times now with this COVID and how it's shattered the economy worldwide. Next 10 years, next year maybe, what will change? What's your opinion? Where do you see? Can you have anything to give us around that?
There is a problem in the world, a major problem. And the major problem in the world is that the production capacity is greater than the world needs. So there's no growth. Growth is difficult. And therefore, the pressure must be on for new development. And I would recommend to anyone, look for new development. I mean, there have been a lot of development in the building industry to make buildings cheaper, to make them lighter, to reduce the amount of heat you need to spend to keep the building warm. So improve the insulation, etc., etc. And the one thing that I don't understand, and where I would recommend people to be moving, solar energy is not being used as widely as it ought to be. All new houses should have solar energy panels in the roof. If you apply for permission to build a new block of apartments or whatever, the top floor should be solar energy for the central heating system, for the whole place, or whatever.
Great. John, would you like to tell us why you think that COVID has a more dramatic effect on you than being bombed in London?
My mind, that COVID is something which seems to be never ending. Bombing is for a short period, maybe one evening per week, maybe 7 evenings per week. But not the maximum that I experienced bombing in London or in Trincomalee was about 4 to 5 hours. And we all thought 4 to 5 hours was terrible at the time. But it was also exciting because we were seeing things changing. we saw all the anti-aircraft guns being fired from Hyde Park. In Hyde Park, they had 144 anti-aircraft guns, all firing at the same time. So there was one square piece, let us say, of the sky, which was covered completely with anti-aircraft fire.
Wow.
So if a German plane happened to be in that square, that German plane was hit, or at least damaged. Yeah. So with COVID, you don't know where it is. You don't know when it's likely to happen to you or to your relatives or your friends. It's just something you hope won't happen. Now, with bombing, etc., you can always take shelter. So a lot of them in London took shelter on the underground. And the underground, you were probably 200 or 300 feet below the ground surface. So you were pretty safe, even if the area was bombed. There were a number of underground stations bombed, but the lower part where the trains were running and where people were let us say, taking refuge from the bombing, those areas were quite safe. And maybe the travelators or the, what do you call the ones? The escalators wouldn't be working because the electricity had been cut off. You could still climb the stairs, the escalator stairs, and you could still escape.
How did that work for the elderly?
For the
elderly, if they couldn't go up and down the escalators?
Well, the elderly had to. They were helped by their relatives. They might well stay down. The elderly would go down there maybe at 6 or 7 in the evening, particularly during the wintertime when it got dark very early. And I was in London from December right through to the very beginning of June. I left London on the 8th of June. And we were then going up to...
what year, John?
That was 1944. Going up to... we then went up to Bolton. And we were in Bolton for 3 months before then we were given our embarkation leave and sent overseas. So Bolton, we never got any bombing there. Never heard a plane. By that time, you see, the Battle of Britain had been won. Battle of Britain was won on or about the 15th of September, 1940. And that was following Dunkirk. And the Battle of Britain was won principally by Spitfires and Hurricanes. And Hurricanes were being made several a day and flown out mostly by ladies, by women, to the various airfields in the southeast of England.
Wow.
And the southeast of England concentrated there because the German bombing was concentrated there. So they wanted the Spitfires to be more or less fairly close. And on the 15th of September, 1940, I think there was 168 or 175 German bombers that were shot down, and there'd been over 100 every day during the early part of September and the late part of August. and they were losing bombers faster than they could build them. So in the end analysis, they had to concede. We were building, the UK was building, Britain was building Spitfires and Hurricanes much faster than they could build
build them themselves.
the bombers, the bombers.
And what year did the Americans come in? When was Pearl Harbor?
The Americans weren't involved until
1945?
December 1941.
Okay.
It was the beginning of December or late November, I think beginning of December 1941 when Pearl Harbor was bombed. And America then was brought into the war by the Japanese, and at the same time they declared war
On Germany.
on Germany.
Was that because Germany and Japan were allies?
That was in
Was that because Germany and Japan were allies?
Germany and Japan were allies. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So
Wow.
that is it. But this is all about COVID. The difference between COVID and the bombing, etc., during the Second World War. So, simple answer is COVID is invisible. You don't know where it is. You don't know when it might happen to you, or etc., etc. You don't know what the result will be if you get it. But with the bombing in the 1940s and later, at least it was for maybe an hour at a time, or maybe 2, maybe 3 hours in any 24 hours. But after that, they were clear, so you could relax again. But with COVID, relaxation is not optional, is it?
No.
You just have to take care all the time. And I think it's very hard. The younger you are, I think the harder it is, because they can't enjoy their freedom as we enjoyed our freedom when we were young.
Well, in fairness, you were hardly free when you were young, considering you were fighting a war.
Well, that's okay, but you know what I mean? As you're young, when you're young, you're optimistic.
Yeah, that's true.
And thank God people are optimistic when they're young, because very few people are optimistic when they get older.
That's very true.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Career Scoop, brought to you by Elevate Career Advice and Elevate Executive Selection. I'm James Fitzsimons, and I hope you've enjoyed listening. Next week, we'll be talking to Her Excellency Ambassador Deike Potzel of the Federal Republic of Germany. Hope to see you there. Bye.